Hello, and I'm delighted to welcome Noriko Ogawa, visiting professor of the Tokyo College of Music and a professor of Guildhall School and Drama in London. Noriko, hello and welcome.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Julia. Thank you. Lovely to see you.
Yes, lovely to see you. Thank you for joining. May we go straight into the discussion? Of course, you are a pianist and a wonderful teacher. It's been a very difficult time for teachers, how to motivate students. I know you have some interesting tips and suggestions and experiences to share.
Well, the complete lockdown happened in London, and that was in late March. And when it happened, the Guildhall School of Music and Drama switched over to online teaching almost overnight. And I didn't want to waste any time with my students. I mean, one by one, they went home to their home countries. And but we didn't want to waste any time. And then I started sort of chasing them online and then started teaching them. And ironically, because I travel such a lot, um, very often I have to leave my students behind to go to Japan or to play concerts here and there. But this time, it just situation became the other way around. I chase my students every week to teach, and then it became such a refreshing experience for me and for my students. And ever since, we are making really quite a lot of progress, and I'm absolutely delighted. And then, but soon after we started online lessons, I came up with this idea of organizing an online concert within my class. And my class consists of first year students all the way up to PhD. So they all belong to different years. So I thought I am going to organize a concert, a project concert, which would suit all of them. So I organized a concert called Preludes and Etudes, and then they pick what kind of preludes they want to play or whose etudes they would like to play. And you can be so flexible with length and how many you want to play. And that has really motivated my students. And they are now practicing very hard, all the way from Australia through Japan, China to the UK, Spain, everywhere. They're practicing their preludes and etudes. So I'm really pleased to say that I have managed to keep up with their motivation and also their work ethic actually. And I work very hard. I teach them with lots of concentration. I come very close to the camera, and then I watch their fingering and phrasing and notes and all the correct notes or wrong notes and all kinds of things, and they respond very well to that. So I don't have any tips really, but it's actually young people nowadays, they are completely at home with digital things. They don't know the world without any digital mobile telephone and computers. So they are very flexible. Their mind is so flexible. They didn't seem to have any problem with moving from face-to-face lessons to online lessons. None of my students complained.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I'm sure this will be very interesting to many of our listeners because we want here to share experiences. And how is this been for you? So have you been able to practice more? What are you working on at the moment?
Well, it was quite an eye opener for me that after the lockdown started, because suddenly I stopped traveling, and then I was at home in London for such a long time, and then suddenly I thought, this is very interesting. When it's dark, I go to bed, and then when the daylight comes back, I wake up in the morning. And I've been, when I look back on it, I've been living with jet lag for, well, as long as I've been playing the piano professionally. And suddenly I've discovered that I have a body clock. So that has been a very new experience. And in terms of practice, I have to confess, I have given a little bit of break from practicing. Because I moved on to online teaching, which was quite a new experience. I have said yes, it's it's successful, blah blah blah, but it is there is something that is exhausting about it. So I really concentrated on my teaching for a little while. Now I am, I've started picking up some, concertos and things that seems like I will be playing in summer without an audience and things like that. And I'm learning some notes. Now my students have inspired me, so I'm learning some studies and things.
Fantastic. So it's a two-way relationship. You inspire the students and the students inspire you. What
Yes, it's really quite amazing. Yes, then sometimes I want to demonstrate, oh, this is better fingering, and then I find myself getting a bit stuck, and then I feel, oh, I'd better start practicing now.
I wanted to talk about your upbringing in Japan. Especially, I know that Japanese piano playing is very, very developed and at a very high level from a young age. So, do you have an equivalent of boards like ABRSM and Trinity? Or if not, can you tell us what sort of system exists there?
When I grew up, I didn't have any grades or anything, so I didn't take any exams like that at all. But I went to Saturday School of Toho Gakuen Music School, and which I absolutely loved every week. So I developed my dictation and singing, kind of singing in a choir, and then also that taking all these intervals and things like that. That kind of skill from Toho School. But now, instead of grade exams in Japan, there is a big organization called Pitina, and that they have got an incredible systematic um, competition. I should say competitions, because their competition system sort of starts at the age of 4 or 5, all the way up to you can be middle 20s, and all different kinds of ability and intermediate course or advanced course, that sort of thing. And there are many, many, many competitions, and there are so many young wonderful pianists coming from this patina. So that is it's quite a new thing, but very widely known. Yes. So when I teach students from Japan, I very often come across young pianists, wonderful young pianists from that organization.
Very interesting. And besides the competition, where do the teachers take, let's say, curriculum, or how do they find pieces? Are there books published specifically for targeted ages, or?
I think so, yes. I mean, the all the kind of exercise books and exercise music has changed over the years, I think. I belong to rather old-fashioned Japanese piano coaching system, and so I was brought up with Bayer and Burgmüller and big books of sonatine, small sonatas, and Hanon exercise scales, arpeggios, that sort of thing. But I am sure that people like Patina, and then also that there are many, many publishers, Yamaha, Kawaii, they also have their music schools, and that they have their own textbooks and music and exercise. So those people are very, fantastic with, bringing up little pianists, I think. Some of them are very good at improvising, and they go as far as composition. Some are very good at, sending them to competitions. It's each school has got different strength, I think.
And compared to the UK, do you think in Japan, sort of children and students, do they devote more hours to piano practice?
I think so. I think so. Yes, because not only Japan is quite new wave in terms of piano playing. The very first piano was built in 1900 by Mr. Yamaha. So, it is quite a new thing for us. but we had a lot of influence from Russian schools. So that means a lot of hard work. And so children are encouraged to put many hours into their practice, I think so, yes. And the teachers can be quite strict too.
I see. So is it, I can totally understand because I come from the Russian School of Music, which is quite rigid indeed. And by what age have you decided that piano is the the instrument that you want to spend your life with? When did you want to become professional?
Well, I am a daughter of a piano teacher, and so there were pianos lying around in the house, and my mother told me that I was still I was still a toddler. I would just sit under the piano when she was teaching her students. So it was a very natural process for me to climb up to the keyboard and then play some sort of nonsense pieces that I learned from my mother's piano lessons. So probably that the idea that I thought, oh, I'll probably spend quite a lot of time with this thing came quite early in my life, I think. But of course, when I was a teenager, I started to have very big self-doubt. So I became very envious of friends of my friends that who didn't really know what they wanted to do. In my case, that my piano lessons were already quite rigid, so I had to practice really to make it to my next lesson. But when my friends were saying that, oh, I don't know, shall I go to mathematics or science, or shall I go literature, that sort of thing, I thought, wow, it must be really nice to have this kind of this problem. So during the teenage years, I did keep asking myself what I should be doing rather than piano playing. If I didn't play the piano, if I didn't have to prepare for my next lesson, what would I be doing? I kept thinking, yeah.
Mhm. Very interesting. And so this is a controversial question because everyone is different. But so during your teenage years, how long did you practice for? What was your, let's say,
Well, you got me there.
traditional
You got
day?
me there, Julia. Because, yes, because that was the time I practiced more than any other time. I practiced so much when I was a teenager. I think I was practicing for the sake of practicing. I was counting how many hours I practiced that day. Some days, and I'm still proud of some days that I practiced for 10 hours a day. And
Wow.
then I had this kind of, timetable, in my notebook. And if I start practicing 8:30 in the morning, and then, I had this kind of strict timetable, and then I really made myself practice so much. And that was the time that I developed my own way of practicing, which I use so much to my students
Hmm.
for my own teaching. And that was a time that I sort of invented my own way of making progress, because I'm not the fastest sight reader. I mean, now I live in the UK. This is the British pianists are
Yes.
amazing. You put
Mm.
anything in front of them, they play for you. I'm not like that. I have to hide myself. I have to spend hours sorting out my fingering and really practice. And then a week later, 10 days later, I'm much better. I'm really like that. So but that's a kind of a result of my teenage years, that I practice so much, and then I know that the characteristic of my each of my fingers. And so yeah, interesting. You've got me there. Just
How
reminded me of,
fascinating.
yeah.
What are the characteristics of your each finger? I'm eager to know.
Well, 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 I'm sure that the, like, number four is weaker, and then it doesn't want to work with three very well, and the number five can collapse very easily, and that sort of thing. And then number one in left hand, if you want to bring out some melody, in a tenor voice, now this thumb number one is actually more capable than we think, that sort of thing.
You know, I must share, I never had this problem because as a child, on my fifth finger, I cut my finger, so I can't actually bend this here. And believe it or not, it's been amazing for all the top chords and everything. It's a bliss because it doesn't collapse as my left hand finger. So I do not advise to cut your fingers. I have been I have been lucky to cut it in a way so it always stays in the right position. Extraordinary. And tell me a little bit about your timetable. You said you had a timetable where at 8:30 you would sit and practice. Did you have any other sort of things in your timetable? Let's say practice this bar a number of times or practice left hand a number of times. How was it?
When I was a very small child, yes, I did. My teacher used to write numbers above the piece that I was going to learn for next week, and she would put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 1 to 10, and then I have to circle those numbers if I practice really the first time. Second time is circle, circle, and as a child, it gave me a really huge sense of achievement, and then it gave me quite a lot of fulfillment, but then I'm talking about when I was 5 or 6.
Mhm.
When I was a teenager, as I said, that practicing for many hours became a kind of pleasurable kind of, I mean, torturing pleasure. And so if I practiced for like 7 8 hours a day or something, but at the end of the day, my head was spinning.
Sure.
Thought, wow, I've done. It's a bit like being an athlete, because it's a kind of
Yeah. Sure.
athletic years of my life. So yeah, but I didn't have this kind of um, strict timetable for practicing, but I kept a kind of log, which I still do. If there are several pieces that I have to practice, and then I put Beethoven first, second, third movement. If it's a concerto, I have a special category for cadenza, and then if I practice, I circle. Maybe it comes from my childhood memory, this circling numbers, but I still do that. um I don't have I didn't really keep up with this Hanon practice in the morning or anything like that, but I always use a tricky part of the piece that I'm practicing at that time. And then I use those bars to warm up when I first start practicing.
Which brings me to the question, which etudes did you play? And do you think that playing etudes is vital for developing technique?
Um, I wish I had practiced Chopin etudes a bit harder. I always try to fake them, but uh, yes, I think so. I think so. I played many, many, many Czerny etudes, and then I did Chopin, of course, Chopin studies. I also did Moszkowski
Hmm.
studies, and but when I practice, for example, Rachmaninoff studies, it is just unbelievable how he can actually, how each finger can really be played in, and they go into the keys so well and so correctly. And Chopin studies, we have to be rather careful. I always feel that if you practice too hard,
Yes,
and then you can get pains and
totally.
aches. But Rachmaninoff, if you practice correctly, you don't get pain. You just feel so warmed up. And so those studies, I strongly believe they are fantastic to develop technique, and confidence at the keyboard.
This is very, very interesting. And I also would like to ask you about your American education, because I know you went to Juilliard. So that's quite, I think, a jump from Japan to the United States.
Yes.
So, what were the biggest challenges, and how did the piano teaching there was different from the Japanese methods, if it was?
Well, I have to. say that I have to let you know that I was a little bit in an unfortunate situation at the Juilliard, because my great piano teacher was pretty unwell, and then after that he died, or he passed away while I was a student. So for me, the biggest influence when I was a student at the Juilliard was really from my friends, and from all different kinds of instruments. And also that every Fisher Hall and the Metropolitan Opera and Carnegie Hall, they are at your doorstep almost. You can walk to all these world-class venues. And then I heard so many amazing concerts, and so almost all operas available then, and things like that. So those things were the biggest jump in my life, because tickets were very affordable. Those days, tickets were very expensive in Japan, but tickets were suddenly very affordable for students in New York. And then my friends would give me all kinds of information. No internet, but friends always knew what was coming from the paper. So we used to queue up to, I was fortunate to hear some Horowitz concerts as well. And so those things that I remember, that, queuing up over, late at night into the morning, that sort of thing. So those things inspired me to really to carry on. But my actual piano lessons in the studio were not always successful.
Mhm.
But it sounds a little bit negative, I know, but that was a time that I thought, if somebody taught me, I would really like to learn. And I became more and more desperate for more information. So it's a slight mixed kind of feeling when I speak about the Juilliard, my own experience. But I had the sudden freedom from this rigid society in Japan. I had the complete freedom, and I made so many friends. I went to all kinds of concerts. So yeah, those years were very exciting. Yeah, that also mixed with the atmosphere of that such a big city called New York City. Yeah, it was just
Sure,
incredible.
sure. May I ask you about your routine on the day of the concert, if you have any?
Uh, Depends where I am, yes, but I wake up, and then I sort of exercise every day, because it's just to keep fit. So I don't skip on the day of the concert. I also exercise to have breakfast, whatever, and then I have to practice. Um, I usually do harder practice before the day of the concert. So I don't do too much on the day of the recital. I warm up, and maybe I practice maybe up to an hour, maybe at most, in my house, if I start from my house. And when I go to the venue, when I get to the venue, I always play absolutely every single note. I play from the beginning to the end of the program. Usually it takes what, 1.5 hours, nearly. If I go over something, it takes nearly 2 hours. But that gives me a very good chance to get to know the instrument. And that is the time that I get friendly with the piano
Mhm.
there. And then I have a break and put the makeup on, paint my face.
Yes, yes, sure. Very, very interesting. Are you a nervous performer, or have you ever been? Yes.
I am a very nervous performer. I really am. So that's probably why that I have to play everything before the concert. I have to be fully warmed up before the concert. I have very often I can see my hands being sort of shaking. Not very much at recitals, but at concerto, because concerto performance can be very intimidating. You look around and you're surrounded by everybody, and then right on your just on your left, there are players, and then suddenly orchestra stops and there's cadenza for 5 pages or something like that. And then and then because cadenza is so dramatic, like Tchaikovsky number one, so dramatic that you have to look so confident, and then there are some, like, I don't know, to some beats of rest, and then dramatically, I have to go back to this another part of cadenza. And then when I'm resting, I can see my hands are going like this, and I always feel that, please, those violinists, please don't take any notice of my hands. So yeah, not all the time, but it could happen. My hands are shaking. But yeah, so yes, if there is any medicine to cure our nervousness and kind of stage fright, I would pay anything for it. But I have not really found any. So
But you still go on the stage and you deliver wonderful performance. I think it's very important for many not to be discouraged by being nervous, because
that's right.
almost everyone is nervous, and
That's
it's,
right.
you know, you need to just overcome and do that.
Yeah, and then with a bit of nervousness, we do have this kind of adrenaline, and then sometimes I could be, well, touch wood, I am quite a physically quite strong and resilient person, but I could be having a little bit of headache or something like that. But with adrenaline, everything goes. So, that's really amazing. Talking about this, online concert and things that we spoke a little bit earlier. I actually conducted two online concerts with students yesterday. And it was very interesting what they told me after the concert. All of them, because I asked each one of them. They said they were all very nervous. Suddenly, their own piano, the pianos that they use for their practice, suddenly looked like a piano at the concert hall and felt like one.
That's very
And
different, right? Yes.
very different, very different. And it was very interesting. They could feel this adrenaline going, although they were in their own room where they feel the most at home. So it's very interesting, this kind of, it's all in the mind maybe, but this suddenly, so it's not only just walking out to a huge concert hall. When you know that you've got your audience next to you, it doesn't matter how many thousand miles away, when they're with you, as an audience, it's something happens to performers, I think.
Just to finalize this absolutely extraordinary conversation, which is also for me very, very interesting, because I see and I discover very, very interesting facts, and also about the piano playing and how people different are. So, what would be your advice if you actually looked at yourself at a younger age, and said, "Oh, I wish I had done something differently"? So, is there anything you wanted to change, or let's say maybe more brave, or any other repertoire explore?
Well, I think I've already said that I should have practiced Chopin studies a little bit harder. But um, it's 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 difficult because I come from this rigid society, Japan, which I am very grateful for. My teachers were very strict, and my mother was a very strict mother, and all kinds of things. But when I see the kind of freedom and then the kind of very well preserved enthusiasm that my colleagues, the British pianists, have got, and then I sometimes go into kind of fantasy world. How would have how would I come out, had I gone to some schools, some kind of British style schools.
Mhm.
So that's a kind of field that I am just genuinely interested, because because my teacher you had to practice this study for next week, you have to learn this sonata for next week, like this. But if had I been left alone and to discover and explore repertoire, what kind of field would I, so that sort of thing is something that I very often go into, because I'm surrounded by fantastic British pianists, and when they speak to me about their music, or their how they are
Experience. Yes.
enthusiastic about the repertoire and everything, is so refreshing. Yeah, so that's
I
something that, yeah.
I can totally understand, actually, because I think Russia is in that way very similar. If you do music, you just do music, and there is nothing else, and you do a very prescriptive sort of life, and exercises. But I agree, it's very interesting to hear from you.
Yes, that's right. Some musicians I have, heard that, oh yeah, I play the piano, but I play the cello too, or I play the clarinet too, or I play tennis, and then or I did mathematics at university or something like this, and that's so refreshing and very interesting. Yeah.
And I think it complements each other as well, these things. But
Mm.
Noriko, you have been a wonderful guest. Thank you for sharing these invaluable experiences.
Thank you very much, Julia.
Yes, and hope we stay in touch. Thank you. Bye
Thank
bye.
you very
Bye
much.
bye.
Thank